before we get going, I want to do something. I'm going to take a quick selfie of us all, because why not?
Shall I strip down?
Say hello, y'all. Okay, so yeah, my name is Paul Colls. I've been making video games for over 20 years now, which that's crazy. So this is my talk, Cheats for the Boss Fight, and really just a bunch of tips from 2 decades shipping it. If you don't know, shipping it refers to the term that we joyfully use in the games industry when we complete a project and we get the game out on the shelves or on digital stores. So that's what that means. Anyway, first things first, a bit of preparation, and a bit of audience participation as well. We'll come back to this later. I'd like all of you to think about your top 3 games. If we've got time at the end, we're going to come back to that. I'm going to ask you a few questions. One for later on. So, who are you? So as I say, my name is Paul Colls. I've been working across disciplines in the games industry for the best part of that 20 years. I started off as an artist, and I'm going to take you through that journey now. I'm now creative director at Sumo-Digital. Come on in. So the art years, this was the start of my career. So right at the start of my career, I really wanted to be an artist. I was all in on that. That's a pixel popping Game Boy artist I wanted to be at the time. And that's how it started. My first game was a game called Star Wars Obi-Wan's Adventures, which as a 19-year-old working on a Star Wars title was pretty epic at the time. I was very excited. Then I worked on the Game Boy Advance, which was a 16-bit system, and from the Game Boy Color, which was like 4 colors I could use, then I went to using quite a few more, which was very exciting at the time. I worked on a bunch of US-based sports titles, High Heat Baseball being one of those. Then I went to the PlayStation 1 and got some real power. I worked on a game called Alfred Chicken. That's when I started to first use 3D tools. I'll be honest, I kind of struggled with that skill set a little bit at that time. So I carried on making 2D games. That was where my skill set sat. Army Men Turf Wars, if you know anything about Army Men games, not much to shout about, but I'm kind of weirdly proud of having that one on my CV. There was a Lego title called Lego Drone Racers back then. And I worked on Max Payne, which was a Rockstar title. And off the back of Max Payne, Rockstar actually purchased our studio, and we became Rockstar Leeds. Rockstar Leeds still going to this day. Very cool studio. And then, this was where I hit a bit of a wall. So as I mentioned, like working on Alfred Chicken, I started to understand that my skill set wasn't really where it needed to be. And I had this ambition to always be an artist in the industry. It became quite apparent that I didn't really have the tools. My boss took me to one side and we had a good conversation. He's like, look, you know your stuff about games. He said, but we're going heavily into 3D. You just don't really have the skill set. And he was right. It was hard to hear, but he was right. So he kind of pulled me to one side and said, we're setting up some new departments to get this Rockstar journey going. We're going to set up the QA department. I'd like you to manage the QA team and grow that over time, and with a promise to move over to the design team in a few years. So I was a bit disappointed, of course, because I wasn't going to be an artist anymore. But at the same time, there was a new opportunity, and so I took it. So as a QA manager, I worked on Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition. These were all on the PlayStation Portable. Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories, followed by Vice City Stories, and a game called The Warriors, which was a beat 'em up at the time based on the classic movie. So the key thing there for me was that I had this vision in my head of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be in the games industry. And it kind of came crashing down around me, but at the same time, a new opportunity came up in the space that I still loved. So I grabbed that with both hands and just threw myself at it. And as promised, they moved me along into the design team. So I became the lead designer, or one of the lead designers at Rockstar Leeds. I worked on the Rockstar Games Presents Table Tennis first, then Chinatown Wars on the Nintendo DS and the PSP as well. I worked on Red Dead Redemption, as mentioned at the start, LA Noire, Grand Theft Auto 5, and then I left Rockstar. I joined Activision Blizzard. I worked on a mobile title called Pitfall. It was a remake of a classic Atari game. And I worked on a Call of Duty Strike team on mobile as well. Activision shut the studio down at that point after a couple of titles. And again, that's just another reminder that things don't necessarily go the way that we hope they might, but you've just got to keep going. At that point, I set up my own studio. In fact, the last time I was here, I was talking about my own studio. And that was a VR-focused studio where we created a new VR IP. And I was there for about 4 or 5 years. And it was great. I learned so much in that time. But eventually I moved on as well and joined Sumo-Digital, which is where I'm at now and loving life, frankly. But I can't really talk about what I'm actually working on in a minute. I've been working on it for a while, and I'm really excited to sort of talk about it when I can, but it's going to be a bit longer before I can say anything about that one. So, but yeah, that's a bit of history, and the point being that there's quite a lot of information there in terms of the games that I've worked on. I'm going to share some tips that I've pulled out from that journey that can hopefully help some of you if you're looking to get into the video games industry. So I'm going to start with what I'm calling the quintet. These are kind of 5 pillars for establishing good faith, like when you're building a team. It's primarily from a leadership perspective, but there's definitely lessons within here that can help you regardless. If you're wondering, that's 5 from the Umbrella Academy quintet. You see what I did there? The most important thing, obviously, people. It's an obvious thing to say. It really is, but the obvious often gets overlooked. The people we work with, they are a fundamental component of any team. Again, it's very obvious, but it's in my own experience often been overlooked. You've got to prioritise your people. You've got to make sure that team feels focused and that they feel supported. It's really crucial to make sure that you've got a good team that's got trust at the heart of it. And you can help achieve this in a couple of ways. And this is not just for leads, this is for, if you've got a little strike team and you're going off and helping each other out as well. You've got to give clear, actionable direction. So there's a real tangible thing that you can actually, the task is clear. You can go do that task, and you can clearly address or assess whether it's been done properly. And if you've given that task, make sure you're available for discussions during the course of the duration of that task as well, because then you can help give relevant feedback and help push people along on that. This is a key one for me. Optimism is a very, very powerful tool. There's always a need for pragmatism in what we do, especially when deadlines or milestones are involved, and we have to be pragmatic. We have to hit those things. We've got to be sensible, of course. But remember that people bounce off of pessimism. We don't like the negative, especially when it's coated in kind of pessimism, really. So optimism always gets people excited, and it helps push people along. Strive to work with conviction and integrity. Do as you say and acknowledge when you change tack or you address a mistake. It's really important that, certainly if you're a lead or if you're starting to push a team forward, that you own your mistakes. You're going to make them. And the more honest you can be about that, and stick your hand up and say, yeah, that's my bad, I'm sorry. The sooner people will trust you, will get on board with the message and help push you forward. Related to that, you're going to learn and you're going to fail together. That way, you only have to learn those difficult lessons once. And that's really important, especially when you're working to deadlines and milestones like that. This is a big one as well. Don't fear those that you consider to be better than you. Imposter syndrome often creeps in for everybody. We always talk about it, it's thrown around a lot. But everybody feels a bit of that, regardless of whether they admit it or not. Those people, in most cases, will almost certainly feel the same way as you do. We often have this habit of putting people up on a pedestal when they never even asked to be there in the first place. So that's just something we're... and absolutely nobody has all the answers, especially me. Instead, try to take inspiration from your friends and your peers and your colleagues. Look to them, talk to them, share ideas and any of the fears that you might have, and then you're almost certainly going to find common ground, and you'll all push yourselves through together. And this is really, really important to me. Just be aware of the type of colleague that you want to be. And just look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, would you want to work with that person on a day-to-day basis? If you can answer yes, then chances are you're in a good place. It's worth remembering. Communication. So again, it's an obvious one, but sharp communication skills are essential. Effective communication is the backbone of kind of any successful team. It really is. And it's obviously more important now than it's arguably ever been, especially with the changes. We've already heard about the changes, and we've all experienced it over the last few years. It's meant that we've all had to adopt new ways of kind of working, but also communicating with each other. And it's been challenging, like certainly at our level, like in video games, working with people all over the country, different time zones, like all going through this hellscape that was COVID. It was a real challenge. So it's really important that you maintain those close communication skills. As a leader, or as somebody that's, again, helping to push those little strike teams forward, it's crucial to deliver a clear and articulate vision that's reiterated across the team until sort of everyone can act as a sort of motivated collective. You're all pushing in the same direction, you're all singing from the same sheet. And also as a leader, you should never feel precious about information. good or bad, making sure that you're giving your team that information just really helps the team understand the context. They will help you do something about the issue, and they'll start to trust you. You know that if you trust them with the knowledge, they're going to trust you to deliver the right message to them, and they can help. It's really important that communication persists. And related to that, of course, solid communication. It builds trust, and ultimately, it'll build a better product. But it can be tricky, and it takes commitment from everybody. Another related to that, endeavour to ensure that you have an honest and comfortable working environment. You've got to facilitate that open communication, but people will only communicate in that way if they feel that they're able to be their true selves, and that's something that's really important as well. They've got to feel that they're supported when they're having those conversations with you. In part, that requires effective and timely methods of communication that's sensitive to the workload of the team. Obviously, overloading the team with meetings, everybody's going to feel stressed because they're not getting the work done, so you have to think about that as well. However, and one example that I can give, it's better to get a meeting established to facilitate communication than just assuming it's happening. This has been something that we've learned over the last few years, especially with COVID and working from home and whatnot. The old ways of kind of absorbing information by osmosis almost in the office are kind of gone. You have to make sure that people have heard the message and received the message so that it can all help together. So yeah, if you get the meeting set up, typically your team's going to be better informed. Brilliant, job done. Worst case, the meeting felt a little bit unnecessary because it was obvious. And well, we move along. Great, at least everybody knows what we're doing. Next, quality. So, how do we ensure that our work becomes synonymous with quality? It's a tough one, this. We know that to stand out, that quality is paramount. But how do we guarantee we hit that quality? Well, we can't, is the short answer. It is a bit of a paradox. The medium of developing video games and many creative mediums is actually very subjective. But often it's not, and that's really the paradox. It's generally easy to discern if something looks good or if it plays well. But we often attribute quality to titles where neither of those things kind of ring true. So what gives in that case? Well, focus, consistency, and attention to detail are often key in the perception of quality. I can give a couple of examples. I don't know if any of you would have played a game called Vampire Survivors that came out last year. If you look at it, it looks like a game that came out 30, 40 years ago. It's very old school in the way it looks, the pixel style art, which obviously I love, and it's very simple to play. You literally use one analog stick to move this character around the screen. On the face value, you might just go, well, but when you start to play that game, their focus on delivering a very concise and clear experience makes that game really compelling to play. So you're moving this character around the screen, and as you're playing, you're leveling up. Your character gets more power-ups, more special moves, all that kind of stuff. And the VFX that are kicking on the screen, it looks fantastic. It feels really, really cathartic to play. And that was the goal of that title, just to give you that real sense, that positive feedback when you play that game. And they do it really, really well, and that's because of the focus on the experience that they wanted to deliver. Talk about attention to detail a little bit. When I think back to my own career working on games like GTA or Red Dead, you think about like the moment that a player runs down an alleyway, they're chasing gangsters or something along those lines. I know for fact that when the artists are sort of going to town on those alleyways and really looking to sort of make that running down the alleyway more than just getting from A to B, they start to think about the details in that space. Even if you notice them or not, that detail's there. If you go into that alleyway, there's visual and environmental storytelling all over the place. If you really look, you'll go into alleyways in GTA and you'll see, I don't know, a blood smear on the floor. Like something's happened there. There's a story being told in that environment. And that's true all across that massive world that they've created. That's what I mean by attention to detail. It's really going the extra mile just to make sure that this world that you're running around in, this sort of digital kind of paradise, for want of better, not really true GTA, of course, but it's just full of detail and love that team have thrown into it. So that's what I mean by attention to detail. All of those things help with that perception of quality. Learning. So, appropriate. Or what I like to call the sponge life. The sooner that you accept that you will never know everything, the sooner you can become a sponge. And what I mean by that is a sponge for knowledge, of course. more you know, the more skills that you have at your disposal, the more likely you're going to be to find your place. And find your place, hopefully, in the games industry, if that's what you're looking for. But never let go of that thirst for knowledge, even if you get your foot through the door. Continue to strive for growth in your own development. Keep working hard, keep pushing, because that's how you will succeed, that's how you'll excel at doing what you do. These are all considerations for me as I put my team together. The current team I'm working with wasn't just me, I was working with others to pull this great team together. I love this team, they're a fantastic group of people. And when I think about my team, I want to work to the assumption that every single one of them knows more than I do about their respective discipline. And they should know more than I do about their respective discipline. And in most cases, that's going to be true. You should never fear not having the answer, especially in a position like mine where I'm not going to have all those answers. Like I say, I don't, nor should you. There's a power in saying, I don't know, and looking to your colleagues and your peers to get those answers and learn and level up. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and you've got to stay curious, especially in an industry like the games industry and the tech industries in general, where things are changing every day. So creativity, the big one. This is really important for me. It's kind of in the job title, really, but I've always believed that our creativity represents the heart and soul of our teams. But actually, certainly in the games industry, it's so much more than that. It's the primary reason that every video game is purchased, or every channel is streamed. Like it's the ambition that's the heart and soul of the games industry in general, just full stop. As individuals, or as teams as well, our ideas of kind of what we want to share with the world, whether you're coding, whether you're animating, level designing, modeling, or you're making music, it's our art form. It's how we show off our capabilities, again, not just our own, but our teams as well. And it's how we share our stories, and it's very, very important. And without those ideas and that creativity, our commitment to entertain as well, gaming just doesn't exist. And personally, on a personal note, I'm really proud of the UK games industry and what we contribute to the world. We've got some amazing talent in the UK, and we need to keep bringing that along. So my hope is that one day that some of you in this room are going to knock it out of the park and do a hell of a lot better than I do. I want some of you in this room to be responsible for the future of gaming. Is how I see it. So, how does all that help you? Well, it's a good question. I hope through some of that stuff I've already mentioned, you're listening and you're trying to remember what I've said. I appreciate that it might not all be apparent right now or applicable right now, but in time there's some lessons in there that I've learned over my 20 years that are going to help you out. I'm not done yet. There's a few more power tips. Pitching. So if you manage to get your foot in the door in the games industry, and it's hard, but keep going, pitching is something that you'll do a lot of. You'll hear stories. You'll hear stories of projects being signed off the back of like one-pagers or beer mats. And that does happen, but it's a rarity. And it can be quite demoralising when you think somebody's just walked into a pub with some publisher and they've signed a deal and you're waiting for years to try and get your game signed. I've been there, trust me. It happens, but it's a rarity, and it's usually an exception to the rule where they've got a pre-existing relationship or something like that. What your pitcher's got to do is got to sell the project that you're working on. That's an obvious thing for me to say, but consider this. Why should the person sat across the other side of the table sign your project? What's special about that one? If you're talking to like big publishers and stuff like that, I don't know, Sony or Microsoft or whatever, they're going to hear multiple pitches on a daily basis. They're going to hear hundreds over the course of a year. So why should they pick yours? You've really got to think about that when you start to get into the shoes of pitching your title to other people. It's all about the quality of it. You've also got to sell your team, assuming that you're working in a small team. I'm not talking about the scale that I work at here. I'm talking about, if a few of you get your heads together and you start your own little independent projects. You've got to sell your experience. You've got to think about what you bring to the table. In cases where you have been fortunate to work in the industry, you can sell your past project. Oh, I did this. I mean, obviously I'm fortunate enough to be able to riff on what I've worked on in the past. Not everybody's going to have that. What have you got to do? You've got to sell kind of what you've been doing in the background. Obviously what you've been doing on your college or university courses is critical. But as an employer, if people come and have an interview with me, I'm going to ask you what you've been doing in your spare time. If you want to be a level designer, I want you to show me the levels that you've made in Unreal. I want to play it. I want to have some good fun playing what you've built. And that's the expectation when you go for your junior level interviews, by the way. So you've got to hit that quality. And sell your capabilities on a personal note as well. It kind of leads into what I was just saying, really, but what you do and why you're good at it as a person, not just your core technical skills. And quality through all of that is obviously vital. That's how you're going to stand out, that's how you're going to get that job. And even with applying for a job, whether you're pitching or you're applying for a job, put yourself in your partner's shoes, potential partner's shoes or your employer's shoes. You've got to be objective to kind of what you're bringing to the table. What are they going to question? What are they going to pull apart? And have I got an answer for that? And the answer can be, hey, you know what? I don't have that skill set yet, but I'm really willing to learn. But I'm really good at this, I'm really confident at that. This is a bit of a weakness, but I'm starting to look into that, and I've been doing this, and this. They're going to be very impressed by hearing something like that. I'm going to quote a large AAA developer's corporate spiel, which is never really public facing. And it's really simple, and it just says good enough isn't. And that's something that really struck a chord with me. And it's something that I kind of keep going through the teams that I work on as well. Like if we pull ideas together, I'm going to say new power-ups for a video game or something. And we'll get in the room, and we'll all talk about it, we'll have a great day sort of figuring out what power-ups need to be in this video game. And I'll get the team to come back to it a few days later and go, are they really good enough? And if they're not, we pull it apart, take them out, think about it again, what we're trying to do in this game. Really kind of analyse and come back time and time again to make sure that your work is good enough. And that's true of all of those things we were just talking about. Presenting, much like today. Presenting projects or presentations like this can be quite daunting and challenging to the uninitiated. I used to be scared to death when I started doing these. I was just talking to a few of the guys before this, talking about when I did one in Developer many years ago. It was very scary. Just before Hideo Kojima, who made Metal Gear Solid, came on, that was quite a scary moment. But the point is that it can be quite scary coming up and standing up in front of everybody. So some points to consider when you're doing things like this. Obviously, you've got to remember that you're representing, the company that you work at. So you've got to make sure that the tone and the delivery of your presentation is appropriate. Think about what people are going to take away from your presentation. That's something I've tried to do with what we've been looking at today. Hopefully, there's some good tips for you all to consider as you move forward, hopefully to video games or whatever industry you kind of want to pursue. This is a key one, and this was really good advice I received a few years back. Only talk about what you know and show your passion. Don't stray into unfamiliar disciplines. If I was to stand up here today and talk to you all about coding, I know a little bit about coding, only a little bit, but if I was to try and start talking to you all about coding, I would very quickly lose my way, and it'd be very obvious that I don't know what I'm talking about. So make sure that when you are up in front of people and you're talking about something, you know what it is you're talking about. It comes from, it's true you, it comes from your own experiences. Prepare, and prepare again. I sat in front of my kids last night doing this and hoping that they enjoyed it, and my oldest daughter did actually. So yeah, just make sure that when you're going to do something along these lines, just make sure that you're ready for it. Keep doing it. Do it in the mirror, make sure that you're looking in the mirror and you feel uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable you can feel while you're preparing to do something like this, the easier it is when you actually come to stand up in front of people. So that really helps. And the reason I'm saying this, by the way, is because when you're stood up in front of people, whether it's a room full of people like this, or you're presenting or pitching something to publishers, or to people that might give you some money to sign a game or help fund your project, it's really important that you've got that confidence, that conviction in what you're saying. And obviously, even with all of that considered, whether you're presenting or you're pitching projects, you're going to hit bumps in the road. That's just how it is. I've hit many, and I've heard the words no so many times when it comes to pitching games and trying to get them signed. I've been worried about actually getting food on the table for my family, to the point where I'm going to publishers. I'm not telling them this, of course, but you kind of sat in front of the room, you sat in front of these publishers, and you just go, in the back of your mind, I've got to get this thing signed, otherwise my project goes, the company goes. It's scary, and you're going to hear no, even at your lowest ebb. So you need to understand that it happens. Use that as a platform to grow from and to push off from. They say no, try and understand why they said no. What was it that was weak in your pitch? Go back to it, analyse it, tear it up, and think about how you could re-pitch that in a way that might appeal to them, or at least somebody else that you're going to go sign with. Just don't stop, keep going. That's the key thing. That really is the key thing. Persistence. A bit like Terminator crawling on the floor. This is a quote from Calvin Coolidge, who's the 30th president of the USA. I heard this once, and it kind of floored me a little bit, because I just related to it so much. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent, or women. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. Now, it's obviously a very old quote, but it's something that I really believe in. And I think if you look back at the stories that I've just told you from my own experiences when I was starting out, when my career went in a slightly different direction, one that I wasn't really that happy about at the time, I carried on, I pressed on, I used that as an opportunity to learn and to grow. If you keep going, you're still doing what you want to do. The only thing that can stop you from succeeding in what it is that you want to achieve and what path you want to follow is when you stop. And if you stop, it's over. You've got to keep going. So to recap now, in summary, be yourself, but don't be scared of change. Endeavour to acknowledge your own weaknesses, address them and grow. Don't fear those that you consider to be better than you. More often than not, they're going to feel the same way. Get inspired by your friends and your peers and your colleagues, learn from them. And if you do get into the games industry or whatever industry you're in, maybe consider asking somebody to be your mentor. You know, maybe you've got a good working relationship going on and they might be able to spare an hour or two just to help giving you a few more pointers to help you learn a bit more. If you're going into games, make time to play games. I use that excuse all the time, I really do. Whether it's for yourself and for your colleagues, like playing with your colleagues online and all that kind of stuff, it's your craft, you've got to care about it, you've got to know about it. It's a great excuse, it really is, but yeah, it's true. Stay ahead of the curve as well, like look into new technology, especially stuff that you know nothing about. So in the games industry, things are changing all the time. In the tech industry, things are changing all the time. And I would argue in the creative industries too. Make sure that you're aware of those changes. Make sure you're aware of new game systems that are coming out. What's sort of trending at any given moment. Like what new features are in games that are resonating with people. I hate to say it, but things like free-to-play and things like that have become so dominant in our industry. Like, why are those systems dominant? What works about them? What doesn't work about them? Why do some people love them? Why do some people hate them? Like, understanding what's going on in the industry is really crucial. And obviously, this one I think is one of my most important points. Actually consider what type of colleague that you want to be, and would you want to work with that person? There's no such thing as a stupid question, and please stay curious. Hi, my name is Paul Colls. I am Creative Director at Sumo-Digital, based in Sheffield, and I've been working in video games for well over 20 years.
So, what advice would you give students that want to break into your industry?
So, the advice I give students that want to break into our industry is to continue to kind of push your studies outside of what you do on your curriculum. Use whatever software or editors or anything that you can to improve your skill set, and make sure that when you stand in front of a potential employer that you're well equipped to sort of show off some really cool stuff that you've been working on.
What challenges do you face in your role?
That's an interesting question. What challenges do I face in my role? Many challenges. So I have to balance the creative desires of myself and my team with the realistic kind of limitations of video game development, and we have to make sure that there's a balance between, like I said, a balance between the creative desires of the team, but the kind of the reality of getting the game out and complete.
What inspired you during your journey to where you are now?
I've been inspired to get into video games since a very early age, partly through family and friends, partly through playing video games from a very young age. I knew very early on that making video games is what I would do for my career. So yeah, it was a bunch of things really.
How was your experience today?
I loved today. I've been to the Create Expo before. This is my second visit to present. Today was fantastic. I love sharing the knowledge that I've built up over my career. And there were some great questions at the end, which is always a good sign that people have listened and hopefully enjoyed what I had to say. But yeah, it was a fantastic day.
As an employer, what skills do you look for?
As an employer, there's a bunch of skills that I'll be looking for. Like, I want to know that you have the commitment and drive to continue to improve yourself. I want to know that you can do the job that you've come to be interviewed for, and you can do that well. And I also want to know that where you might be falling short in your skill set, that you are willing to push and learn and improve yourself to make sure that you can improve the team that you're working on. So yeah, have the skill set, be willing to get better.